Welcome to today's Earthsoft Office Hour. This is a simulated live office hour, which means that even though the content you're watching is pre-recorded, you can still submit questions in the questions pane in the GoToWebinar sidebar. We welcome questions. In fact, some of the neat dashboards I'll be sharing with you today were created with some extra configurations. So if you're interested in learning more about a specific dashboard, widget, some sort of configuration or feature, we would love to hear about it. You can contact us at officehours@earthsoft.com or email us at support@earthsoft.com for more information. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the content for today is basically going to be involved in 4 components, and they're sort of woven together in this dashboard tour. We're going to be talking about interactive dashboards that are designed for folks who might be a relative EQuIS Enterprise neophyte to be able to interact with and consume our EQuIS data without having a lot of training hours necessary behind that. We'll go ahead and provide some background information on the site and sort of how you might be able to navigate using different kind of dashboard configurations. We'll discuss various means of content organization, and we'll also talk about both dashboard and widget customization. However, I'm not going to get into the details of either of those content pieces. There are some instances where you will see widgets or dashboards that show the customization that's beyond just the standard enhancements for an out-of-the-box dashboard or widget. And if you want to see more or know more about how to do that, you can certainly contact us again at officehours@earthsoft.com, and we'd be happy to help you out. Additionally, I'd like to give a big thank you to Guilherme Amaro for setting up these dashboards for us. They're really neat, and they showcase a lot of things that you can do with EQuIS Enterprise, either as a standard super user or even an advanced user. The other piece of information that I want to make sure I share is that you can get more information on our help pages or on our online documentation, and you can access that from help.earthsoft.com/6.6/enterprise, and that'll take you to the online documentation specific to Enterprise version 6.6. It'll get you started with your dashboards and widgets and general configuration information. Additionally, if you want more inspiration on how you might lay out a dashboard, there are some examples in our Earthsoft Community Center dashboard gallery. That is, in fact, a dashboard itself in our community center, where you can access screenshots of a bunch of different examples of dashboards from various clients of EQuIS sort of across the board. You can see how they've laid out and utilized their dashboard configurations to present data that's really easy for them to consume and share with their users. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into EQuIS Enterprise. You can see here our very first dashboard we're going to examine is our landing page. This one is numbered number 6. That actually has no bearing on what I'm talking about today, but the rest of the title of Gold King Mine landing page, this is where we're starting from. A little bit of site background exists on this dashboard, and maybe I ought to give you a little bit of information about it myself. So essentially this data set was created by Earthsoft Training from a series of disparate data sets from a couple of different reporting agencies, but it's all related to the Gold King mine spill that happened in August of 2015. Essentially what happened was there was a 3 million gallon mine waste release into Cement Creek, which is a tributary of the San Juan River, and then the ongoing efforts to monitor and then clean up all of that acid mine drainage what occurred all along the San Juan River. And it happened basically across not only the 4 corner states, so Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. There are also some reservation lands that were impacted by it as well. So there are lots of different reporting agencies that we pulled data from, all from publicly available sources, and sort of took it all in together and put it into our EQuIS training site. So we'll see that there is some interesting data sort of along that time frame. It is a pretty comprehensive list of metals, although and additional parameters, although there aren't a ton of days of sampling because it was a relatively short response time frame. There are lots of different locations and analytes of interest in that kind of thing. So we can find out more about that spill itself by looking at this dashboard. So let's do that. So we'll start with this widget that's in the upper left-hand corner. Before we dive into any more of the widgets, I should pause and say all but that map you see in the lower right-hand corner are all HTML widgets. They just happen to be pointing to different kinds of information. The HTML widget can be used to great effect As long as you can either use HTML code or JavaScript, you can pretty much put whatever you want into this widget. So you can see in some cases we just had site photos as well as some background on how to use the dashboard or background on the mine spill itself. We also have a couple of widgets that are showing links to YouTube videos. So I'm going to try playing this, but I might be getting crunched on bandwidth, and if that's the case, it's not going to go ahead and play. Oh, look at that. We can actually see the treatment process from a publicly available YouTube video. So there's somebody dumping some lime into that water to try to control some of the waste. Okay. So that's really handy to be able to link to videos like YouTube, for example. I've seen others use that functionality either to link to an Earthsoft office hour video that's available, or maybe they have an internal training video. So if maybe they have an EDP upload dashboard and they want to remind folks how to do that very easily, you could just have a video right there embedded in an HTML widget and sort of show them how to go through that process with a big click here and watch me first or something like that. Okay. But this upper left-hand corner dashboard says, welcome to the landing page of Gold King Mine. In this dashboard, you'll find the navigation widget with the links to dashboards prepared to view your data. That's this widget over here, furthest upper right-hand side. It says, click on one of the links to view specific dashboards divided by topic of interest. And those topics of interest are location groups, method analyte groups, and action levels. You could group the data all kinds of different ways. I mean, we could have decided to do it by governing bodies. We just have location groups that pretty much include the states. We don't really have any information on reservation locations, although there aren't that many in our particular data set. But we could have added additional groups related to location or something like that as well. We could do it based on the groups who were doing the sampling at each of those locations. We also have, of course, the method analyte groups, which are combined lists of the related analytes, right? And then we also have some action levels, which depending on what area you're looking at, we might be looking at a slightly different required action level because of all of the various governing bodies and locations that this particular facility covers, okay? The last item in that overview note is in the bottom of the dashboard, you will find documents and folders and EDP status for this specific facility. So let's scroll on down and see what that looks like, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about Gold King Mine itself. So here we have the document and EDP status widget where we can see a photo of the sampler as he's getting ready to collect a sample, or maybe he's already collected it. It's hard to tell if that bottle is full or not, although it looks awfully clear to have that San Juan water in it. I can click through and see a handy rock is propping up his instrument there while he's taking measurements. And you can sort of click through and see all of the photos and documents related to this particular facility. And this is a nice way to be able to engage with any of the site information that might not otherwise be, easily represented. However, it is also possible for all of these photos to be related to a particular location, and we'll get a chance to look at one of those here in just a second. But the document and photo browser is a great way to share all kinds of information, different kinds of files with folks within your facility. And the really handy thing about that is when you upload those files, you can assign specific permissions. So if you need to control who has access to them, you absolutely can. Then, of course, we have our EDD status widget, which basically just tells us how many EDDs we've managed to upload and what the status is. Looks like our percentage is not so hot. Only 2 of them have been successfully submitted. We had some errors on others where we have that red stop symbol. If I maximize that, I can see what the specifics of the issues are, and I could download that error log so that I can turn around and address those if that's part of my workflow. But since we're really looking at an overview of dashboards in general, I think the EDD status widget is maybe a little bit too data manager level of information. It's probably good to see, hey, we have been receiving data, and that's a good reason to have this EDD status widget in here. But for the purposes of what we have these dashboards configured so that they are easy for a neophyte to navigate, we can probably move on from that. So I'm going to scroll back up and I want to take a look at the Gold King Mine Locations map widget. So this is the map widget here, not an HTML widget like the rest of them we see in this view. But this essentially is just going to include our Gold King Mine locations in this view. There's no other data behind this except for just all of the points that we have data related to them. So I'll zoom out just a little bit more so that you can get a full view of all of the locations within this facility. So the spill site happened in the San Juan Mountains somewhere around this point where we have the start of the San Juan River tributaries. And you can see essentially the snaking points that run along that entire river all the way through those four corner states of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. Okay. Because there are different governing bodies who are in charge of sampling different data sets, there is some difference you'll see from some locations to others and the types of analytes that folks were interested in, whether they were just taking surface water or sediment or soil samples. So there is a fair amount of variation in all of the data that we're going to be looking at. But in this handy Gold King mine spill note here right in the middle, there's also some indication of the type of data that we're expecting to see throughout this database. And it tells us that the spill contained known contaminants of arsenic, cadmium, and lead, as well as the metals aluminum and copper. So we can expect to see all of those analytes in our data sets. So we'll keep an eye out for those and see if we can, identify the point where the plume might have come through the various locations. So let's take a look at the Gold King Mine navigation options here, and we'll start our tour around the dashboards. So I'm going to skip over the location groups for now, and first I want to take a look at the method analyte groups so that we can get an idea of the kind of data set that we're working with. A good place to start as any is the field parameters. Those might give us a nice indication of what kind of water quality we're dealing with just in general. So I'll just click on this field parameters button, and that will bring me directly to the field parameters dashboard. Now remember, that is an HTML widget, and it just has those buttons coded with the particular dashboard ID. All right, and there we are on the field parameters dashboard. Now if I actually pop out of full screen view, you can see that this linked us not only to a particular dashboard ID, but also to the target facility of Gold King Mine. And I don't have a facility chooser up here at the top of the window. That works out great because this is a facility-specific dashboard. This is a great way to control folks' navigation, particularly if they don't really understand or aren't familiar with the concepts of facilities in EQuIS. So essentially all you would do is create links with not only the dashboard ID but also the facility ID for each of your particular locations, and that'll allow you to sort of embed that as an HTML link, and that way folks can navigate using those buttons rather than having to understand maybe the dashboard navigator that you're familiar with within the typical interface. So back to full screen view here, and let's take a tour of all of the data that we're looking at here. So the field parameters, again, this is sort of zoomed in a little bit closer extent than maybe what I had in mind, so I'll zoom out one click here on the map widget. And again, all we're looking at in this case is just the locations in the Gold King Mine facility. But in the upper right-hand corner, there is a welcome widget, happens to be an HTML widget once again, and it says click on any of the locations available in the map widget to update the time series chart below. So here's that map widget, here's that time series chart widget. And then it says use the mag navigation to go back and forth between the mags. We have that right here. We can also return to the landing page if need be. We can click on any of the analytes available in the drill down widget to see those details. So if I scroll down a little bit further, we can see that drill down widget here. So we can look at more information related to that data. And then finally, we can check out the report download section at the very bottom of the dashboard, where we can basically download all of the source data that was used to create all of these individual widgets. So let's check out some locations here. For fun, I want to click on the SJMC location. And there's actually two reasons I want to do that. Notice when I clicked on SJMC, the time series chart widget jumped down to SJMC here. It was initially hovering on 32nd Street Bridge, basically waiting for more information about where to go check out information. But additionally, when I click on that location on my map widget, I also see the opportunity to look at a location-specific JPEG. So if I click on that button, it will download that image for me, and I can open it up in my photo viewer, and there's a picture of the SJMC sampling location. So that's pretty handy. That's the same information that we were looking at in that doc and photo browser, but instead of having to access it from there, because it is geolocated, it's tagged with that location information, I can pull it up from the map widget. Okay. So I can see where SJMC is on the map based on this, nice display here, and if I hover over it, you saw maybe that flash there for a second, it actually highlights the data there in the widget. So I see the highlight saying, hey, that's the data I'm looking at. Now in this particular view, we have each of our time series charts separated by location, but if we had maybe an individual analyte with lots of different locations in a single time series chart, it's handy to be able to see that hover color for related data. So now that we focused in on this particular location, let's take a look at the data that we're actually looking at in this time series chart. So maybe scroll down a little bit so that we have this in straight focus. So in this time series chart, we can see our legend across the bottom where we've got our color coding of each of the analytes that are presented here. And both the left and right axes that we see on this chart are listing our units as well as our range of values there for each of our given analytes. Now, because they certainly are different types of analytes, we don't have a single axis. They've got different units and all of that. So we've got pH, oxidation reduction potential, field turbidity, conductivity, dissolved oxygen, field salinity, and temperature. So we can use the legend along the bottom to interact more with this data. We can click to toggle on and off some of this data here. So maybe we want to just look at salinity, turbidity, pH, and temperature maybe. Maybe we get rid of temperature too. And maybe even field salinity. So now we're just looking at turbidity versus temperature or versus pH. But we can see the related analytes to one another for each of the given locations. So this is the SJMC location, but if I were to click on any of these others, we would see a different view of the same analytes, right? So there we go, Baker's Bridge, different presentation, same kind of data set, okay? We could focus our view using the date chooser, except that in this case it's actually been disabled, so we're just going to have to look at the entire time series itself. On another chart, I'll be able to show you how you can use the slider and the date chooser to be able to focus your view a little bit more precisely. But it's a really nice way to take a look at the related field parameter data right there for each location in a single chart. But maybe we want to know more about the individual field parameters sort of as they relate to one another. Let's scroll on down to our drill down widget, and it'll give us a slightly different way for us to consume that data. So we've got our drill down widget here, and what this does for us is it takes all of the data in a given report that we've set up behind this widget, and it aggregates it based on how we ask it to. We can say maximum or minimum or average or that kind of thing. And in presenting that information, tell it how we want to organize those results further. If we want to do it by analyte or by date or by location or things like that. Okay, so it's up to us to sort of configure this before the clients or our users, I should say, are ready to consume the data. But all of that's been done for us. So here we are on our drill down widget, ready to check out what we're trying to figure out from this information. So we have all of our parameters listed here: conductivity, temperature, pH, ORP, dissolved oxygen, field turbidity, and salinity. And what I'm going to do is pick on pH because I feel like that's a pretty easy analyte to understand in this particular circumstance. So I'll go ahead and click on pH. And it showed me that the max aggregate for that, by the way, was 9.2. So let me back out one level so we can confirm that. Click this back button in the upper right-hand corner. And notice it says the max value for pH, aggregate of everything everywhere, was 9.2. Okay, so I'll click on that again, and that'll allow me to drill down into my list. And in this case, you can see that we have all of our individual locations are listed here, but some of these guys don't have their names next to them. I can hover over the lines that don't have a location listed here on the left, and my tooltip way over on the end here is going to show me what that particular location is. But as you dive down further and refine your view better, you'll be able to see more of that content, which can be really handy. But I notice here that CC48 location has a maximum pH of 5.38. That seems like an awfully low max to me. So maybe I want to dive into that and see what's going on with that data set. So I can click on CC48 to get in a little bit closer. And now I can look at this data, and it looks like it goes from October of 2015 through September of 2016. And interestingly enough, it looks like the October and the September data is pretty much identical. 3.63 was the pH measured at that location on 2 different days, about a year apart. So interesting. That is, in this case, it's still listing it as our max report value, but I can actually dive into the data itself, maybe download the report from one of these easy view widgets and confirm, verify that 3.63 is in fact the only measurement that was taken for location CC48 on that September 27th, 2016 date. Okay, but it's a nice way to sort of maneuver through data really quickly, and because it's nice and graphical, it's pretty easy to understand. And so, you know, I've looked at pH, maybe I want to back up and look at turbidity, or I want to look at something else. I can do that really easily. So I can check out turbidity, got lots of maxes and mins. Maybe I want to see if I can find that same other location again. Again, I have to sort of hover until I find it. And maybe I'll give up just so I don't have to have you all watch me click back and forth and try to find that CC28 location, but it's somewhere in this list, I promise. And so we would be able to dive down and then see the related data to that as well. So I went ahead and backed out once more, and I'm ready to, oh, look at that. I managed to mouse over CC48 just then. Now I can actually check out the field turbidity data for CC48. And it looks like there's actually one fewer result available in this particular data set than there was for the pH data. So interesting to see that there's a little bit of variability in the available data for even each individual location and analyte. But there you have it. It gives us a chance to navigate and check out the content of each of those locations and their aggregated data there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up and take one last look here, see if there's anything else that I feel is worth exploring. Maybe I do want to find out a little bit more about CC48, figure out what's going on with that particular location, maybe why that pH value was so low, especially for the maximum aggregate value. And so what I could do is try to locate it on the map. I can do that by knowing, first of all, that nomenclature generally relates that location somewhere in Colorado, which is this part over here. And I can zoom in on Colorado and see if I click and drag, can find that particular location. And look, there it is, CC48. So it looks like that is the headwaters, more or less, in terms of our sampling locations. And so we can even see the pH and the turbidity values that plummet pretty low there toward the end of that measurement cycle. So really interesting and neat to be able to interact with the data that way. Okay, so the field parameters are all well and good, but it might not be a bad idea to actually get into some more of like the analytical data from the laboratories rather than just from our field measurements. So I'm going to come back to my Mag Navigation HTML widget. And this time I'm going to pick on the copper danger method analyte group. The copper danger method analyte group happens to have, I think, pH, zinc, and copper as its target analytes. So we can check out the particular details for each of those analytes, how they relate to one another and all of that good stuff. Again, we have a nice welcome message in the upper left-hand corner. This layout should look really familiar because it's laid out almost identically to the configuration of the last field parameters dashboard we were on, with one exception. We have a drill down right below rather than a time series widget, and that's because we have some more data a little bit further down, which you'll see when we start scrolling. But again, just like previously, if I wanted to use the map to navigate through any of my time series charts or that kind of thing, I can do that, just like we saw in the past dashboard. But in this case, I'm just going to scroll down and start trying to get my hands in on that data. So this first drill down widget is telling me that this is the quantity of detected results per date for the inorganics group. And essentially what it's ultimately outlining is how much data do we have for a given time frame. So look at this. We've got a ton of data in September of 2015. A ton of detected results data even. And then it sort of starts to trickle down and you see it peter off. I mean, there's a little bit more here in early months of 2016, and then it drops off again. So, I mean, that could be relative to, you know, the weather making it more difficult to sample much past October. Some of these areas might be difficult to reach, but really what I think it reflects is the fact that once the spill was contained, there wasn't really as much of a need to go out and do all of the collecting, and there wasn't as many high detections and that kind of thing. So this is probably a pretty good reflection of our total data, you know, how it shakes out across the time series charts that we're going to be looking at in a minute. So this is actually really handy to see sort of as a snapshot before I start to scroll down to get more into the data itself. Maybe I want to see what the differentiators for the data in September of 2015 is, so I'll go ahead and click on that. And I can see that our number of copper results, we have 740, and the number of zinc results, we have 709. So a slightly higher count of copper to zinc, but that's okay. We still are going to have a probably meaningful quantity of data to be able to look at and use Enterprise to investigate further. Okay. So I'll scroll down a little bit further into our Analyte Details section so we can see exactly what we have going on. In our map widget here on the right, we have a copper concentration over time, or rather over location. So it looks like in this particular display, all but this one location, we have some kind of data for copper. And it looks like in this instance, when this last most recent data set was collected, all of the concentrations were less than 200, which is great news, especially given the fact that if we cast our eyes over to the left side here, we have a date drill down by location max report result value drill down widget. So what this is showing us is the maximum reported value of, in this case, copper by location, by date. So let's see, I've got a couple of concentrations here that are significantly over that less than 200 value that we see reflected in that map. And it's not surprising that it's from August of 2015 and September of 2015. That's like the biggest part of the fallout from the spill. We even see a little bit of an issue there in October, but it finally starts to get under control in November, and we see, you know, some improvements there. Maybe some snowmelt loosened it up in the spring there in 2016. As we see those values go up a little bit more. This is all pure speculation on my part, of course. No actual data besides just looking at these numbers and sort of knowing what I do about the area and the river. Okay, but let's check out this September data and see what the story is. So if I click on that max of 930, I should be able to get in a little bit more on that particular data level. So when I click on that September day or September value, I can see then all of those concentrations broken out basically in percentage or comparatively to each other within this sort of rainbow of colors. And we can see that SJ4C was that maximum value that was reported the drill down layer up of 930 micrograms per liter. Okay. Coming in slightly below that, SJSR, still pretty high. Okay, so we're looking at some pretty significant concentrations of copper in here, right? But it's a great way to sort of navigate and look and try to figure out what the story is and try to figure out what's actually happening in this particular data set. Maybe there are particular bends in the river that would cause the SJ4C location, which is right over here, to reflect that kind of higher level. Who knows? All right, so I'll go ahead and scroll down a little bit further and we can check out the zinc data. We have the same kind of information laid out here, it just happens to be flip-flopped. So we've got our drill down widget here on the right and then our map here on the left. And interestingly enough, with this map, we have mostly locations that have a less than 200, a couple of them not reporting any zinc data. Remember, we saw that there were fewer results reported for zinc than there were for copper, so this isn't totally surprising. But if I eyeball these locations up here toward the start of the river and the sampling effort, it looks like there's some values that exceed 800. And when I cast my eyes over to the drill down widget, it confirms that. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on those locations a bit in the map so that I can see those a little bit more readily. Maybe we can compare them apples to apples to the drill down widget. So we've got our, let's see, about 5 locations. This guy right down here is A73, and then these other 4 are CC48, A68, M34, and then A72. So those are our interested, or our locations of interest. It looks like that, what did I say, that was M34 from before is less than 200, so we're probably not going to see it represented very much in this drill down since it's presented again by max report result value. But let's see what we can find here. It looks like CC48 is greater than 800, so it is likely either or maybe both of the highest levels that are reported for September and August of 2015. So let's take a look at the highest value, which was reported in August. And I'll click on that and look, I guessed right. CC48 right there with that max value of 4,100 micrograms per liter of zinc. And we also see A72 showing up there, which falls right in line with what we see here on the map. A72 was reported at 760 micrograms per liter. And that orange color is the range of 400 to 800 micrograms per liter. So those guys are lining right up, which is what we would expect to see. And then A68 is the next greatest value here at 290. And again, if I cast my eyes over on the color ramp here, 200 to 400, that A68 is green. That also falls right in line with the data that we're looking at in that drill down widget. So it's corroborating the data that we're looking at, and it's a nice way to be able to consume that information without having to dive into some crazy long tabular report. It's just right there on screen for us. Okay. Maybe we want to take one more peek at our pH data. We can certainly do that here from our additional drill down widgets that are here. We can either do a drill down by location that we have on the right, or we can do by location in a slightly different representation here on the left. Okay, so it looks like they both are drill down by location, and then the other is drill down by date and location. So we've got our locations listed here, our dates are listed here, so it's sort of up to us however we wish to investigate that. But let's see what we can find about, I'm just arbitrarily picking these guys. Looks like most of this pH data, we've only got about one record for each of the locations. And that's pretty much corroborated, as we can see in this date information as well on this side. So the pH data maybe not quite as helpful or representative as the copper and zinc data that we were looking at before, but that was way easier for me to determine that by looking at these drill down widgets than it would have been for me to try to dive through reports and figure out what the story was with some, what I would feel like would be missing pH data, right? So I'm going to go ahead and page up and get to the very top here so that we can navigate to our next location of interest. So we checked out the field parameters of our method analyte group dashboard, and then the copper danger, which is the one we're on now. So the next one that I think we're going to navigate to is inorganics. And this is going to allow us to look at all of the inorganic data, not just the super focused information that we see on this copper danger page. Okay, so I'll click on that inorganics button and we'll wait for that page to load. And as that page loads, you'll notice that this is a different kind of dashboard. It looks very different than the other two we were looking at. The layout actually is more or less the same. We have the map on the left and our Get to Know You HTML widget on the upper right, as well as in Mag Navigation. But man, are those colors different. And we're also missing some additional items that you might have noticed on the previous dashboards where I can't make any changes to any of these widgets. All of those editing options within the widgets themselves have been hidden. And if you remember what I mentioned before, that there would be a couple of advanced configurations visible, this is one of those advanced configurations. So this color is not part of the typical color range within Enterprise, at least out of the box, but this one has been enhanced and added to this particular dashboard. Additionally, all of those navigation options are missing for me. Even though I'm an administrator, I don't see those on these widget headers here. See, there's nothing there. All I can do is scooch them around, okay? So that's pretty cool, at least to see that that's available. So if you wanted to maybe lock down a dashboard for other users so they can't monkey around with it, this is a great way to do it without having to get in there and make sure that their permissions are so precise for a particular dashboard. Okay. So let's dive into this and see what we can find. All right, so I'll go ahead and scroll down a little bit on this page and we can see what we're looking at. Of course, we've still got our base map. And actually, if I make sure that I maximize this other section, it looks like some of the sediment locations with detections have also been turned on. So if I turn off my Gold King Wine locations, I can see locations where I have sediment data that had some detected inorganic compounds there. So that's pretty interesting. Additionally, let's see what else we've got going on if I scroll down to our inorganics group, quantity of detected results per analyte. So this is similar to the same other drill down widget we looked at when we were in the copper danger dashboard, but you can see we've got a larger spread of analytes. We're looking at some salts, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and calcium. And I can see the number of samples that exist for each of those analytes. So let's check out magnesium just for fun. So I click on magnesium, and as soon as I do that, I then see a spread of the available detections that are present in each of the various time frames that the samples were collected. So we've got August, September, October, November, and then it jumps to 2016, probably because of snow. It's hard to get out there and make those samples. So we've got March of 2016, June, August, and then it sort of follows the same sort of pattern of sampling of August, September, October as we saw at the beginning here. But just like we expected to see based on the other concentration of detected analyte widget that we looked at, there's a lot of detected analytes in September, a fair number of them in in August rather, and they peter off, maybe because of sampling effort maybe came down a little bit, but also because the immediate impact of the spill might have also, fallen off a little bit as well, okay? So let's check that out. Let's see if that information holds true as we click through and look at some of these other widgets. So here's the drill down widget, and it's actually presented the exact same widget 4 times, and it is just showing us those same 4 analytes side by side by side by side. So we can see the relative concentration for each location, see if we see any trends and that kind of thing. So let's take an eye over here to magnesium first, since that's the one I picked on in the first place. And I'm just trying to cast around for what I think must be the highest concentration. And my eye is immediately drawn to this bright green color, greenish yellow. And it looks like that concentration of 20,000 milligrams per kilogram is for location NSW020. It even shows us that it is 6.4% of the total reported magnesium concentration. So that's pretty interesting. So let's take a dive into that and see what we've got going on there. So when I click on that particular piece of information, that particular concentration for that location, I then get a chance to see the 3 times that sample was collected, or that location was sampled, I should say. The big screamer that we saw in the previous view is this big blue section, and then we've got other values, either a relatively high one in August, a very high one in September, and then you see it start to drop off in October. So let's follow that same information for the NSW020 location in the other analytes that we see in this drill down widget and see if that carries through. So I can hover over potassium here and I can see that we've got NSW020 at 8.2% of the full piece of the pie, and that looks like it's pretty much the highest concentration as well, and in this case it's 12,000 milligrams per kilogram. Interesting. So again, if I click on that, very similar spread that we see with potassium as we saw with magnesium. It was somewhat high in August, very high in September, and then it dropped off again in October. So let's see if that carries through for sodium and calcium. So calcium, right here, I see that NSW020. I click on it, and it looks like it's having a moment here. Perhaps that part of the drill down widget is having some struggles there, so maybe we'll just leave that calcium, and for a minute, I'll come over here to sodium. Same location. Click on sodium. All right, that one's having trouble drilling down as well. But I can still see that my overall concentration for that particular location is pretty much the highest, with the exception of this non-location. There's some data that must have made it in there that doesn't have some location data available to it. Okay, so it's really interesting to see that it's more or less the same for each of those salts kind of across the board for that location. Okay, so we're getting some more information. We're starting to understand even more about this particular facility. But I'd like to know more about a particular region, perhaps. So now that we've gotten our hands on the data just in general, and maybe looking at time frame, not so much at particular regions, we can take a run at it in a slightly different way. So I'm going to click on Return to Landing Page, and that's going to take us back to that site landing page that we get all that background information on. And I'm going to click on a different link in that navigation widget to take us to the New Mexico location group. Okay, so this is another way, again, to group your data and present it in a dashboard. So this time it's going to be all of the data related to New Mexico. If you're keeping up and familiar with the map, that's all of the stuff in this lower right quadrant here. That's New Mexico. So I'll go ahead and click on New Mexico there, and that'll take us to that page. Again, these pages are set up to be facility specific, so I'm certain that I'm only going to be getting Gold King mine data. A, because that's how these widgets were configured, and B, because that's what those links are configured to be, is the facility-specific links. Okay. So look at that, a map in the upper left-hand corner. This is feeling very familiar to the MAG configuration of those dashboards. But you see there's actually some extra information showing up in our navigation pane. It looks like we could even dive into some action levels. So let's take a look at our drill down widget for New Mexico first. And then once we do that, I'd like to take a look at those action levels. So if I scroll on down here, I can see that the drill down widget is basically the max report value, probably for all of our New Mexico locations, but listed out by sample, or by analyte rather. So I can maybe eyeball calcium, since we were looking at that in our inorganics dashboard previously, or I can say, what is the story here with this aluminum? So if I click on aluminum, I can see what the aluminum concentration looks like over the various locations there. And again, this is the max report value. So it looks like the big scary one here in this case is this 600,000 micrograms per liter reported for the SJ4C. So if I click on that location, I get a chance to, again, to see where that concentration is and where that spike might be. Okay, it's very interesting to look at the data this way as well. But since I know that there is some action level information that I might be able to compare this to, I think it's best for me to dive into the action level information. So I'm going to use that link there to navigate to our livestock water action level. And wait just a minute while it navigates that page. Again, it's going to be facility specific, just like the last ones we've been looking at. And this one's actually very neat. You can see that this is a slightly different layout. Yes, certainly there is a map and our navigator, but at the very top of our dashboard, we have some filter widgets. We have an analyte filter widget as well as a date range filter widget. The analyte is actually a particular configuration of our filter list widget. Can also be configured for analyte group or location, things like that. But in this case, it's configured on the analyte level. Essentially giving us information, the opportunity to select from this drop-down some of the target analytes that we have collected for all of these various locations. So we can use some of these dynamic traffic lights, time series, and maps to sort of focus those in on those particular analytes there. So as I've been talking, this page has been loading. This is one of our more complex pages, so it sort of takes a moment for it to load. So I'm going to be patient here for just a moment. All right, so my patience has paid off and now the dashboard is refreshed. So you can see that we've got, again, our analyte chooser and our filter date range, like I talked about just moments ago, as well as our traffic light map, which is going to be displaying circumstances where our analytes exceeded the livestock water action level. Although we don't know what that is based on this particular view or even what the analyte is, which is, of course, what that analyte chooser is for. Then if I scroll down a little bit further, I can get more information about the particular traffic light data because I can scroll through this and see that there's aluminum data as well as hardness and calcium and copper, although it looks like aluminum is in the grand majority there, maybe some lead as well, vanadium. Interesting. So we've got a lot of different kinds of analytes listed here in this traffic light, some which exceed our action levels and some which don't. And we also have that data represented here on our time series chart. So we can see that information for each of our locations. Again, remember this is specific to our New Mexico locations. Maybe I can check out MW020 and I can use the time series slider here, which isn't disabled on this particular widget, and zoom in to see the particular details related to our aluminum concentrations versus vanadium and lead and the like. So you can see in this case, aluminum was sampled a lot more than lead and vanadium were in the other cases. Okay. Very interesting to see though. I like being able to digest the information this way. You can click through, let's check out SJ4C. That was that one location that had the very, very high concentration of aluminum. Okay, really interesting, just being able to digest this information by flipping through each of the individual time series charts. So let's see how the choosers, these filter selectors, will impact the data that we present. I'm going to pick on aluminum first because it's the first in the list and it's the one I looked at on the previous dashboard. So as soon as I click that drop down, you'll notice that the traffic light map updates, as does the traffic light widget, and then the time series chart. So the only data that's going to be presented by all of these various widgets are going to be related to aluminum. No surprise, that's the selector that I picked, so I would hope that would be what would be reflected. You can see that there are a couple of locations here that didn't have an exceedance for aluminum. It's close because it's at the warning level, but it's not at the action level. And if I wanted to see more details about those particular locations that didn't have the exceedances, I can of course scroll through my traffic light list here until I find it. So there they are. There's MW020, that must be one of those locations. And then if I scroll a little bit further, ADW010, okay? And I can tell that in this case, it looks like we just have duplicate values reported for those two locations. In fact, I see a lot of duplicate data showing up here. So I'm not sure if that was added in duplicate or what have you, but it's very interesting to see that data, okay? So maybe I want to switch from aluminum to, oh, I don't know, let's pick lead this time. I select lead. It looks like we're in trouble with lead. We're all red here on the map. I can scroll down through my list. All of my concentrations of lead exceed my action level for livestock water. What about copper? Once more, we see, as it thinks through all of this, there's a very small amount of copper data available. In fact, only 2 locations even reported it. So SJ4C and SJSR. And we can see each of those copper concentrations as a single column on our time series chart. Okay. So maybe I want to clear out my analyte chooser here for now. And I want to look at a more focused date using that date range. Let's see what time frame has some interesting data. Looks like we're looking at September, what is that, 5th through 24th? Maybe 5th through 11th. Let's pick that. So in my filter date range, I can maximize that view, and I want this to be 2015. I said September 5th. Let's start with the 4th just to be safe. And oh, I've got that in November. Let's change that to September. There we are. And then I said I wanted to go through the 11th. Sure, let's go through September 11th, 2015. So 2015, the 11th, and then I'll just change my month from November to September. I, of course, could also pick one of these neat dynamic date ranges instead if I preferred, so that I can see something more dynamically in my date range there. But specifically, since I just looked at all of that data, I just want to look at this particular microcosm. So I'll go ahead and click Apply Filter on my filter date range, and it's going to take a moment while it goes through and applies all that good stuff, and then hopefully we'll see all of that information updated and reflected on our traffic light map, our time series chart, and our traffic light widget. So we'll have to sit here and be patient just for a moment while it gets there. There's the traffic light. We're waiting on the map and that time series chart. All right, so there's our traffic light map and then our time series chart. And you can see now we're looking at a much more focused date range. I didn't have to fiddle around with my time series slider at all, because all of that time series slider bit was affected by my date range that I set up here. So that can be really handy when you're trying to focus in on a particular data set, more specifically, rather than having to monkey with a bunch of different individual widgets to have the filter widget applied. It will cover basically the entire dashboard. Okay, I can scroll on down here to our drill down widget, and if I wanted to eyeball my aluminum one more time, I certainly can. Maybe I want to take a look at my calcium because it's a relatively high value. There we have a calcium value of 530,000 micrograms per liter for that SJ4C location. If I click on SJ4C, bet we can see it. There it is. Oh, actually, that's a slightly different value. So I wonder, I think actually the drill down widget doesn't end up being included in that filter widget, but I could be wrong. I can certainly find out about that from our development team. Okay, but we have a really another way to be able to digest and view this data. And you'll notice the thing that was really cool about this is I was able to affect the data that was being presented to me just using these analyte and date range filter widgets, which means if you wanted to, you could set up a relatively grand and general dashboard and expect that your users are going to be able to fine-tune their particular data set that they wish to view, consume, etc. by using those filter widgets to affect that data. As always with these time series charts, I didn't show this, but of course you can download the time series chart to various file outputs and as well as the drill down widget. And so that can be really handy as well when we're looking at this data. Once you've gotten a nice focus on it, you can download that data and have that represented right in front of you. All right, I'm going to return to the landing page now because there's one more dashboard that I said we would look at, and it happens to be another action level dashboard. So it's going to be very similar to this livestock water dashboard we were just looking at, but a little bit different. So I have to go back to the landing page to find it because remember that livestock water was specific to the New Mexico locations, whereas the EPA RSL action level table is actually going to apply to all of our locations. So I click on that EPA RSL dashboard link. It swings back into the map for me, slightly different base map. We can still see those locations that are becoming pretty familiar to us from looking at them in a lot of different dashboards. And we also have some information about locations where we have some iron data available to us. In fact, I know by looking at these IDs and also where they happen to fall on the map that these are all Utah locations. So I said that it applies to all of the data in our facility. Apparently it's just Utah. That's okay. So we can scroll on down and see how that data is actually presented in our charts. So here's our time series chart here. It looks a little bit different than what we were looking at previously. It's just a different skin on that chart. But I can grab my time series slider once more and scoot that all the way in here so that we're looking just at our September data from 2015. Maybe try to make this as big as possible there on that slider. And of course, if you wish to adjust that using the boxes in the upper right-hand corner of the widget, you can do that as well. But we're looking at this very specific set of data. And as I zoom in, you can see that our EPA RSL table, that's our action level, is below every single one of our iron reported analytes. It only starts to get pretty close to getting below that RSL value right there toward the end of that sampling time frame. So if I'm curious, I want to maybe scroll through each of these and see how that's applied. Now, I might come in and adjust these time series a little bit further because some of the colors are harder to see on this particular background. That's easy for me to do as an administrator or a data manager. But for somebody who's going to be trying to just take a look at this stuff, maybe download it and that kind of thing, that's a little bit, maybe fiddle around with that a bit more. But at least in this case, I've got some data that looks like we finally have some concentrations that are falling below our EPA RSL here. So we actually have two times that happened on the August 17th, 2015, as well as August 13th, 2015. So good news, I guess. Hopefully that's a trend, an overall trend, and not just a fluke. Okay, but another way for us, again, to interact with and check out this data. One more, if I scroll down, we can check out our EPA RSL data, again, in a different way in our drill down widget. It lists every single one of the analytes that would be included in that full table. and we can see all of the concentrations as they're presented, you know, in their relative to each other. In this case, it's going to be the average report result value rather than maximum. But maybe I decide all of this information is, I mean, it's fine, but maybe I really just want to look at a table. I can do that because the Easy View widgets here at the bottom, just like we've seen in all of the other dashboards, allow me to download the data that happens to be behind these reports. We have some of the raw data of either the most recent sampling or all of the sampling for our Utah surface water locations, or I can download this crosstab data, which I know is going to be much easier for me to consume and understand and view. So if I open up that particular crosstab, it's going to give me that data in a nice formatted table, maybe even with a template if it's been configured with a template, and it'll give me, oh, look, it even has a template, and we can see some bold instances where we have a concentration that exceeds the short-term irrigation water action level that's listed here in this table. And each of the locations is split across tabs here, so I can click along each of the tabs to see what kind of variations I have in my concentrations over time and over location. Okay? So you can certainly use our dashboards, fancy as they might be, still to just download that data to be able to look at and explore yourself. So that was a lot of dashboard information to digest. I know you probably got a chance to see a lot of information about this MineSbill data that you didn't know you were going to learn. Hopefully you've been maybe inspired a little bit by some of the examples that we've shown here to maybe fine-tune your dashboards for either your particular audience or a particular data set and grouping it so that it makes sense to you and your particular projects. One of the things I like to say about Enterprise is if you can imagine a dashboard, you can probably build it that way. It sort of let your mind be free and think about the kind of information you'd like to have included on a dashboard. It might require some coding included in an HTML widget with either HTML or JavaScript, or you can, you know, maybe just get it configured with, you know, maps and time series chart and a drill down widget. Or maybe you add the data grid in and have your Easy View reports and all of that as well. It sort of just depends on how you wish to present that data to your folks, your users, in order for them to access it and understand it the most. So I really appreciate your time watching this today. I know it's a slightly different format than what you're familiar with, but thank you for sticking with us all the way through to the end here. Again, if you have any questions, if you have suggestions for future office hour topics, or if you'd like to sign up for a future office hour, you can certainly email us at officehours@earthsoft.com. As we come to the end of the year, we're only going to have a couple more office hours before we take a break for the winter holidays, and then we'll start back up in January with a bunch of new content as we get excited about ramping up for EQuiS 7. So get in your requests for topics for office hours and let us know if you have any questions. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.